Hey guys, how's it going? You're watching VaulSC. Today we're going to take a look at another review of a infiNity sectorial, an infiNity faction, and this time we're going to be covering off the Caledonian Highlander army, a very popular sectorial. See them around a lot. I don't play as Ariadna, I don't really play as Caledonian myself, but there are 3 opponents in my local meta that have been playing them a lot lately, so I've had a lot of games against them and I've started to get very familiar with the faction, and that's why I've chosen to talk about them today. So just in general, and I know that a lot of people aren't going to really want to hear me say this, but I feel like in terms of the meta, in terms of the power rankings of factions, Caledonians aren't really right up there. They have a few weaknesses, but they are very cool, they're very stylistic, they're very thematic, in the same way that Japanese really capture the spirit of the sort of samurai and ninja Japan, subculture theme. These guys are the Scots, so you've got Wallace, you've got the Wulvers, you've got the Highlanders, and it feels very Scotty and Ariadna-ish, if I can put it that way. Ariadna-ish. So let's just talk about them as a competitive faction. They have a few strengths and a few things which draw you to the faction that would really make you want to play them. So first of all, Wallace makes everybody regular. He's got inspiring leadership, really powerful rule, and this is a faction that has so much irregular stuff that can benefit from becoming regular and giving you that beautiful juicy green regular order. So we're talking about the Caterans, we're talking about the Highlanders, we're talking about the Cameronians, this and that, Warcore. Everything is a green order token, and that makes for a lot of resources that can be spent. Secondarily, this is a faction that is great at throwing smoke grenades, and regular grenades for that matter, so very high physical in everybody, and there's a great availability of smoke grenades, so if you are having a tough time with snipers and arrows that don't have MSV2, this is going to be quite strong. And just in general, soaking up your opponent's orders by dodging against them happens more often than not with a faction like this. This is also a faction that has access to some specifically good troopers which you can cherry pick, and more often than not you're going to be using these 4 models in your list. So there's Isobel McNeil, McMurrow, Wallace, and the Grey Rifle and the Link team, in my opinion. So if you're going to be committing to this faction and collecting them, just be prepared to not get tired of using those particular models, because they are very, very strong. On the weaknesses side of it though, so we've got to be real about this. We're talking about a faction that doesn't have access to MSV2 at all, that's Ariadna style. So even though you're throwing a lot of smokes out there, you can have access to a lot of impetuous troopers. If you're on an open table and your opponent's playing Varuna with a Kamau, Sniper, and a Link team up there, that model is going to be very, very hard to shift, and you're not really going to be able to get a lot of leverage out of guys coming out of cover and throwing smoke grenades. That's not going to work very well in your favor. That's not to say that's not an insurmountable problem. There are ways to deal with that, but again, it's a bit of a drawback, it's a bit of a weakness. Secondarily, even though you're going to have heaps and heaps of regular orders in your Caledonian army, there's no really ball-busting, super unit that this faction can take. Yes, it feels very powerful to run McMorrow and Wallace in your Grey Rifle and things like that, but there's no Swiss Guard, there's no Hacktow, there's no Achilles, there's no big tag that you can invest in. And what you may find is that other factions don't need as many orders to get the leverage out of their big powerful units, which just win face-to-face rolls effortlessly, whereas you kind of need to keep hacking at it a lot of the time, and those orders start to run dry pretty quick if you're not being very efficient with your attacks and so on. Just in general, there's quite a lot of lack of tech. You don't have any TO camo, obviously. There are a lot of little rules that are missing from your troopers, but we'll discover that a bit more as we get into the faction and go through each of the profiles one by one. Again, this is a fun faction to play. I'm glad they're in the infiNity game. They're really cool, but just make sure you know what you're getting into when you sign up to play Caledonia, because it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are some very clear strengths and weaknesses. So let's just jump into it. There's not a lot of profiles to have a look at, as you guys can see. So I'll just bring this down here. Alright, so the doctor of the faction is of course the 112 emergency service. You can't take a Kazakh doctor, it's going to be this guy or nothing. He's got the choice of being on foot or on the bike. I definitely prefer the on foot option. I generally would take a 112. It's better to be able to revive Wallace or something like that if you need to, or even though you have a few models which can go dogged, sometimes it's better to just drop them unconscious so your doctor can pick them back up again. That is sometimes the best play. And at 12 points, willpower 13, no worries. Just remember that a lot of your Caledonian units aren't going to have cubes, which is going to mean that you can't get those rerolls as often as you'd like. The Doctor, last time I talked about the Doctor in one of my review videos, I said that I didn't really like him. A lot of people sort of came and commented that they did like him. I'm just going to come back to the argument again here. A light shotgun is not really, a good long-range gun. You need to commit this guy over to the other side of the table and really blast things. But at Ballistic Skill 11, you're much better off relying on Uxia for that job, or McMurrow for that job, or an SAS trooper for that job. So I don't really like him in that capacity. He's got a light smoke grenade launcher, but this is a faction that excels in getting smoke wherever it wants. So you don't really need him for that job. And in terms of reviving guys, just so long as you have your on-foot doctor at the back, I think you can, get the job done, get what you needed done. He does cost a single SWC point, so I can see the argument for taking him if you're not going to spend the SWCs anywhere else. But it's up to you. I don't think he's the worst profile in the world, but I personally prefer the on-foot guy. Moving over to the Caledonian Volunteers Corps, these guys are great. They are availability total, which is nice. The one profile that you're going to see the most of and are going to take most interest in is the 6-point chain rifle light shotgun. This is fantastic because a chain rifle is exactly what you need for defending flankers in your deployment zone. People trying to come in and get sharp angles of line of sight into your line, only to be greeted by a 6-point chain rifle. It's not really worth it to try and kill this guy to remove his order. He just defends with his chain rifle, no worries. And he's going to be making up your link team. So the great thing about this faction is that you can take 4 of these guys plus a grey rifle. Yes, you can put Isabel in there as well. We'll talk about that shortly. You can't take the infiltrators in your link team for obvious reasons. But you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to see a lot of like 4 chain rifle guys, or even 3 chain rifle guys, and a regular rifle paramedic, for example. So you've got a specialist, and then there's the actual grey rifle himself, most commonly the AP HMG. And as I've said in a lot of LinkedIn videos in the past, the beauty of this kind of setup is that you're putting the fireteam core rules and buffs onto your grey rifle, who starts with BS13, goes up to BS16, has that additional dice. It's got the ideal gun for long-range deployment zone attacking, and it's an AP HMG as well. So if your opponent's sitting there with a Marut, yes, that can take a lot of orders to rip through, but it's a lot easier if you have an AP HMG. This guy's great for that kind of thing. And if you do get a little bit unlucky and that TR bot crits you or whatever, you can go dogged and keep shooting at him for the rest of the turn. If you're near to the end of the turn, you get unlucky, it may be better to just drop him unconscious and have the doctor revive him, but don't forget there's no cubes, so got to be very careful about that. Non-hackable is nice. Just remember that I believe that will defend against such things as exile. So if you're playing Transmission Matrix and you have an Onyx opponent who brings out their redrone and tries to exile your Highlander, not going to work, I believe, whereas it will work on the Volunteers. So just keep that in mind. We'll come to the grey rifle in a minute, but just back to the Volunteers for a moment. I do note that there is a infiltration option where, again, that's inferior infiltration. It'll be Fizz -3, so on 8s they can be deployed next to your opponent's deployment zone. I don't really love that option because, again, Uxia should be doing that. McMurran can get over there, and with just BS10, I don't see them inflicting enough damage to make that roll worth it. And of course, if you fail the roll, they're just sitting on your side of the table and aren't going to do very much for the game. Light grenade launcher, yes, if you put that next to your enemy's deployment zone, you can spec fire, but again, starting at BS10, it's just not a very efficient use of orders, I feel. It's doable, and there may be some games where you want to go for it, some missions where it might make sense, but I just don't think you'll see that all that much. Again, if you've got SWCs, you might be wanting to put the light grenade launcher or the HMG in your link team, but the grey rifle is going to be doing the shooting almost 100% of the time. Only reason I put the single rifle in there is that you might be charging out in your third turn and going across the battlefield when there's not many enemies left, trying to get that killing blow, and your grey rifle won't have the best range band at between 8 to 16, so maybe you want to use your rifle for that. But again, I mean, although the volunteer gets +3 to hit by being in the right range band, the grey rifle is Bliss skill 13 anyway, so he's, you know, there's a 3-point difference regardless, so you may not even need that. But anyway, a lot of factions are jealous of these guys because they're so cheap and they still provide the regular orders, so you are going to be wanting to take them more often than not. The Dozer. I actually quite like the Dozer because even though he's not really going to be useful for repairing things, and the removal of the isolation state isn't going to be needed that much in this faction, there is the tractor mule control device version, which allows you to take tractor mules, which I feel can be quite a good use of your SWCs. And again, we're talking about a faction that's very low tech. They're not going to be taking a lot of sort of SWC2 super troopers, and the tractor mules, as we'll talk about soon, can be a good way of doing that. Otherwise, maybe leave them at home. If you're having trouble with people hitting you with EM grenades or something like that, I mean, EM grenades against Ariadna is usually not the best way to go. I mean, they can afford to have a couple of troopers isolated most of the time, but there may be a time for it. I feel like, I think Hunting Party, I can't quite remember the rules for that, but let's say William Wallace gets hit by a glue gun or something like that, and you want to free him out of that, the Dozer might be worth it, so don't forget that as well. Caterans. Now, in vanilla Ariadna, you probably don't see them as often as you do in Caledonians. But when William Wallace is turning this guy from an irregular to a regular, he does become worth it. It's harder to distinguish between the camo marker that is likely to be a Cateran compared to the camo marker that's likely to be a Scots Guard with a missile launcher in this faction. Because if you come over here, you can take a Scots Guard 2nd Battalion with missile launcher, and this guy's going to be in deployment zone the same way that the Cateran is, and he's going to be up on a perch watching the table just the same as the Cateran, so you're not really sure if you're up against a missile launcher with an assault pistol as well, or up against a sniper rifle. Either way, you know, you're going to be attacking that camo marker with something that can beat it, but at least there's a little bit of doubt as to whether you're being hit by a template, which is going to do splash damage, or a T2 sniper rifle, which is going to do double damage, that kind of thing. So I find that quite cool. Don't forget about that climbing plus. You might be on a table where you're deploying 12 inches up on the first level of a building, and there's another sort of cliff face in front of you, allowing you to move up even further onto a higher perch. That may be useful. Overall, these guys are fairly average in the ARO department. Once they get discovered, they've got mimetism, but any old, Ruishi or single HMG is probably going to beat them down. They can be annoying. They can punish opponents quite a lot if their opponent is unlucky. I love the T2 sniper rifle. I don't think there's a huge difference between it and the normal sniper rifle, but it is so much more threatening, and your opponent's not going to know whether it's the T2 or the sniper when they embark out. So if you're sniping against something like a guy with NWI and shock immunity, and there are tons of profiles like that in the game now, a one wound model with shock immunity and NWI is just going to flat out be removed by a T2 sniper rifle, whereas the normal sniper rifle is going to just do one wound to it and put an NWI, sadly. So that's why I quite rate the T2 sniper rifle in today's environment. I find that quite useful. And don't forget, you may be attacking with it as well. 2 burst, bliss skill 12. You may be applying mimetism, you may be applying surprise attack, and you may really get a wonderful angle with climbing plus. So don't be afraid to put 1 or 2 of these guys in your list. Yes, they're availability 4. Probably wouldn't go too hard out on them, but 1 or 2 of these guys is a really good idea. Isabel MacGregor is the Diafoe's character, I believe, for Ariadna, and she can join a volunteer fire team. I don't see her all that much, and I feel like it's because the points you're spending on her, the 0.5 SWC, she's quite often just sitting there in the link. The white hacking device isn't the most useful device around, and your link team's going to be doing a lot more work on something like the HMG. Having said that, if you're going to be moving out, the E-Mauler may be quite clutch against factions that are utilizing a lot of link teams, heavy infantry, tags, that kind of thing. The D-charges may be quite useful in a mission where you need to blow things up, like looting and sabotaging, although to be fair, you'd be much better off using something with a DA or explosive close combat weapon and a very high close combat stat, so she's not really going to excel there. The profile that I find probably the most interesting is the E-Mauler assault pistol one. But with the T2 rifle, I suppose there is an argument for moving across the battlefield and playing her offensively with 4 burst and the T2 rifle, BS15 in that correct range band, whereas the grey rifle with BS13 and 0 range band on an HMG isn't going to be as effective as she is, and that T2 rifle can pump out a lot of damage. So I can definitely see the case for her. I can also see the case for leaving her at home as well. I find her fairly average, but she's definitely usable, and I like that. Warcore, only thing I need to say about this guy is that he's going to be a regular for 3 points Warcore, so you may as well take him since you're probably going to be running William Wallace. The War Driver, I can't really see the use for this guy except for the fact that the hacking device is going to allow you to do things like hack transport if you're up against a lot of drop troopers. I don't think Ariadna should be that worried about drop troopers if you've got a lot of guys with chain rifles spread around your deployment zone effectively. So this guy may be an unnecessary expense in a mission like Transmission Matrix. Yeah, you might get the jump on somebody who's decided to take no hackers, but it's more likely that they'll have hackers and just kill them. And the defensive hacking device is one of the things in infiNity at the moment that is most in need of a buff. It's really not a useful ability. So you probably won't see that many war drivers in Caledonia in my view. The Scots Guards, these guys are kind of cool. You sort of need to know what you're doing with them though. If you're just flat out going to scatter them around your deployment zone and your army list, they may not get that much value. I feel that the best way to utilize these guys is either, not at all, or a full-on link team of 4 of them plus William Wallace, and use them for their arsenal, their guns. You've got the Molotov missile launcher, assault pistol, 2 SMG guy with DEP. Things like, the DEP guy, SMGs can't be part of the link team for that profile, but you'd take this one here. There you go, 19 points. So that you take this guy, and this first AP marksman rifle, not bad. Missile launcher, obviously, Molotov. Maybe this guy too, or maybe 2 SMG guys, and then William Wallace, since he's a guy that can join any fire team corps. So you chuck William Wallace in, and that'll be your fire team, and that could be quite brutal if you get the jump on opponents. But movement 4-2, they're medium infantry. They start further out in the table, but making a run towards your opponent is harder. So for that reason, I don't really like them as much as an offensive link team. They can be a defensive link team though, with their missile launcher being armor 3 hanging out there. You might want to support them with a doctor. Compared to other link teams in the game though, we're playing in an environment where there's one faction with a Kamau sniper and a link team, and another one with a hideout sniper, and yeah, you got Unidrons, you got Dakinis, so it's quite hard for these guys to keep up in terms of level of class. What about the 2nd Battalion guys? I find these guys more attractive than the 1st Battalion guys. Specifically the missile launcher profile. So your opponent may not be expecting you to bust out a missile launcher as they move the link team out on the table. You may only have a Cateran, you may be bluffing, but that may force your opponent to be more wary and be less likely to assault you with that link team moving out. For just 31 points, 1.5 SWCs, I don't think he's as good as the Noctifer missile launcher. Very few things are. So again, outclassed in terms of technology by other factions, but given that there's so many other strengths to crutch on in this sectorial, you may still want some AROs, and this guy's a pretty solid one. If you are having trouble getting your SWC points spent, and I do feel that some Ariadna players have that issue, you might like the Molotov. I quite like the Molotov, to be honest. There's going to be some angles where the grey rifle's too far back, he's not able to get into position to utilize them, whereas your Scot will have 4 deployment level 1 with the medium infantry rule from ITS. Molotov might be able to get into better range bands. He might be able to deploy further up on top of a walkway or a building, and that might work out to be effective. A lot of time it won't, but you know, you've got to play them well. So like I said before, kind of need to know what you're doing with these dudes. I like that they have armor 3 as well. But yeah, sometimes they're going to get outclassed. You just got to utilize them as well as you can. Grey Rifles, I feel like, are one of the stars of this faction because they can be linked. If you just decide to take a basic pleb T2 rifle, yeah, that's not bad. I think he'd make a good data tracker. He, at the end of the day, only has Dogged. I'd hate to see a guy like this just get zapped by a random nanopulsar towards the end of the turn and then just get removed, so it's a big chunk of points gone. At BS13, they, don't wow me. There's a lot of things in the game that, have, mimetism and BS14, 15, that kind of thing, which generally outshoot a guy like this. So overall, the APHMG guy sees and should see the most action in my book. Because he's going to link up with the super cheap volunteers. He's going to be your go-to piece for shredding their TR bot or beating their sniper across the table, allowing you to move up and follow up with Uxia and McMurran and whoever else it may be. The fact that he's got smoke grenades can make him a little bit more powerful at putting smokes down than even the Galwegians, just because he's having the link bonus with the smoke grenades as well. This can be quite a powerful way of moving out in the last turn of the game in missions like Acquisition, Safe Area, situations where you just want to get to a point and control an objective or a zone. So you move out, you're throwing smoke grenades with physical 13 and the link bonuses. He's going to get them down very reliably, and then you just shunt your troops in and stick up the points and specialists where they need to be. So APHMG guy's the standout, but especially if you're playing on a bit more of a clustered table, sometimes you want to put the T2 boarding shotgun or the T2 rifle in the link team and be more aggressive, especially considering that you can put the smoke up to cover your path to get into closer range. That may work. But, if your opponent does have their MFB2 sniper, the HMG guy is going to be the better way of dealing with it. Mormaers, I forgot to mention that Grey Rifles can form a Harris with them, but I'm about to talk to Mormaers now, so we better sort of discuss this. I'm not a huge fan of them. So Shock Immunity and Dogged is nowhere near as good as Shock Immunity and NWI. I'd hate to see this guy take that single crit and then be removed at the end of the turn. That's a big wad of points. The APHMG guys are going to be the one you see most often because he's a slow trooper. He's going to start towards your deployment zone. He's got that role of utilizing his BS13 Armor 5 for that shooting. With the small link team, I don't feel like they're going to gain enough of a bonus from having an additional burst to merit, chunking all of those points there. You're going to have a smaller list, whereas the way to play Caledonia usually is to have a big list. I will say this, though. The one thing that I do think that they are good for in Caledonia is if you are for some reason forced to play limit insertion, and if you're for some reason just adamant that you want to play this faction in a limited insertion environment, where I don't feel they're that good, to be honest, taking Mormaers is probably the way to go. Alright? So up to 3 Mormaers or 2 Mormaers and a Grey Rifle. So you might be seeing something like the T2 rifle and maybe a couple of T2 rifles, or even a T2 rifle plus 1 APHMG, and then your Grey Rifle with, I don't know, the T2 boarding shotgun, and that might be something you move out with. I don't particularly rate them. I don't think that this is a faction that should try to play infiNity through that style. There's a lot of other things that this faction does well, but I don't think the style of sort of moving out and trying to muscle them with shooting is what the Scots do best. Speaking of shooting, though, the tractor mules I find quite interesting because they are very cheap. They're continue to contribute to that very large order pool. You can easily take these 2 minesweepers and find spots in their deployment zone, in your deployment zone for them, and everybody else is on buildings and prone and sort of in corners and cracks. So that's one way to go with the Dozer. You're getting heaps of cheap orders for that. I don't mind the guns either. Both of them are legit. If you want to spend the full 18 points and have the Uragans, the total reaction can be very annoying. It's not a good piece to just put in your deployment zone facing the table, because it's got a shorter range and these guys are BS-10. They're very, very beatable. But they can be annoying for blocking drop troopers in your back line, little flankers trying to come around the other side of the table. They can also be very annoying for opponents when you've got maybe a 20 order list and maybe they've got something that you can't really crack as easily, but maybe a guy standing out in the middle of the table in suppression fire, and then you start chucking spec fires down at them because you've got a whole bunch of extra orders you're not using. That's where these guys can really shine. And if you want to save some more points, the Katyusha MRL can do that just as well as the Uragan can. The Uragan is just going to be there if you want to have the total reaction factor, which maybe it's not that strong. So taking one Dozer tractor mule device and a couple of Katyusha or Uragans, take your pick, can be very, very useful, as long as you remember that they have that spec fire option. And again, your opponent may have dug deep into your line, tried to come across, kill a couple of cheerleaders, and just ended up there with, say, just some random Oniwaban who hasn't had enough orders to go back into marker state. Well, even though he's sitting there with his SMG and suppression fire or whatever, you may have a tractor mule, 12 inches away, which just starts lobbing bombs on him and kills him. So they're not bad. I actually quite like them. The SAS is the token infiltrating specialist of this faction. The one model you're going to see the most and get the most use out of is clearly this Fort Observer guy here. On very rare occasions, you might take the Lieutenant purely because it's a decapitation mission and he's a bit safer than Wallace, but you would be giving up one of the best things about this faction, which is a Wallace Lieutenant inspiring leadership profile. So the Fort Observer rifle is a great way to go. Only 24 points for a guy who can do some shooting, can do some close combat, fighting, can do some close combat, full stop. But also the Willpower 13 draw for specialization for just 24 points is the way to go. I'd take two of these guys on missions like Comm Center and that kind of stuff. The other profile that interests me a lot is the chain rifle grenades assault pistol. So 4 dice at short range, packing in your camouflage and surprise attack can be brutal. At physical 13, he's very good at throwing spec fire with his grenades, and the chain rifle, well, very good at defending. So your opponent comes around the corner, you're a camo marker, you reveal, you hit him with the chain rifle. So when you're not needing as many specialists but do like the idea of having that midfield presence, this profile I think is really, really cool. I wouldn't go for the sniper rifle. You've got a perfectly good Cateran for that, and deploying them out in the middle of the table with infiltration is just going to mean that the ranges are going to be shorter. So yeah, pretty cool unit. Even the light shotgun, boarding shotgun, they're not bad. Availability 4, I can see some people taking 4 of them, to be honest, I really can. I personally would take 2, or 1 or 2 I suppose, but they're definitely very good troopers. Moving on to Uxia Cherry McNeil, I see her all the time. She's a great model to cherry pick into this faction. And again, you're going to have so many regular orders available to you. You want something heroic to actually shunt those orders into and funnel the resources into. And of the 2 profiles available here, the one profile I see way more often than the other one is this one here. The covert action one, where you've got superior infiltration and specialist operative, boarding shotgun, 2 assault pistols. So she's amazing for that. This is a great model for looting and sabotaging, where you move into close combat with your D-charges hitting on 18s. She's brilliant for the assault pistols, for your surprise attack, coming around a corner, blapping them 5 times in the good range band. She's got smoke grenades, so she can smoke, move into close combat with you as a camo marker. You have to re-camo for that, of course, but then your CC21 with your surprise attack, so she's going to get a lot of work done with her knife, cutting the throat of things that are dogged and NWI. And at only 27 points, really well worth it. Physical 13 means that superior infiltration is going to work out a very large percentage of the time. So I struggle to think of reasons why you'd want to leave her at home. I really think she's worth taking. The other profile, yeah, okay. MSV1 and regular camouflage rather than limited camouflage. It's tough. I mean, there are going to be games where there's an exclusion zone, so the superior infiltration would have been way better. And she's not the best ballistic skill in the game, really, so boarding shotguns, I don't know. But this profile does have regular grenades, and she, again, is quite good at lobbing them as spec fire with her Fizz 13. So I'm not saying this profile's bad, but you can only take one of the two, and between the two of them, I'd definitely prefer the Assault Pistols one more often. The Caledonian, this is a very strong trooper, but I regret that he's totally outclassed and overshadowed by the new McMurrow. So McMurrow becomes a, can't believe I'm saying this, a regular trooper under William Wallace. He can be your data tracker. He's got total immunity, martial arts level 3, and berserk now, so he's throwing a smoke grenade on a 19. He's got the regular grenades for spec fire. I don't really feel like I need to sell this model to you. This is an amazing, amazing model. The only time you'd want to take a normal Caledonian is where you've already got McMurray and you're running a massive list, and you might be wanting to put one in each group. So you put McMurray in the first group, you've got full 10 orders of him just running across the board, throwing tons of smoke grenades and bashing stuff. Then you follow up with the Caledonian coming through the smoke trail behind him and lobbing his grenades as well. He's also physical 16. So suddenly you've got a very, very strong, alpha strike. At the end of this review of the profiles, I might put together a couple of lists just to show you how that can work. The Highlanders, you should really be making as much use of these guys as possible. They are availability total. You've got two options with them. Either make a link team that Wallace is going to be part of, or have them running free range around the battlefield. Don't forget, for 6 points, you get a chain rifle with smoke grenades, who's also a regular trooper, not an irregular trooper. I quite like the idea of putting 4 of these guys out there, spread across the deployment zone, not in link teams. You want to reserve the core link team primarily for your volunteers in most of your lists. So these guys, again, they're able to throw the smoke grenades down, move into close combat with you, berserk you, and the berserk's going to be on a 27, so dice plus 7, very easy to get an AP crit. And of course they've got chain rifles, so if you decide to dodge, they may pistol you. If you dodge, they may just move closer to you and get into close combat. I wouldn't go with the rifle or the boarding shotgun unless maybe you're going for the link with William Wallace. William Wallace is doing the long range shooting. Maybe one boarding shotgun's worth it in that context, but again, Blizzard Skill 10, it's just not what they do best. So Galwegians, you definitely want to have a box of them. The pack that you get, which has the Christopher Lambert one, love that little box set. The models have so much character, and you'll see a lot of usage and success with your Galwegians once you get your head around how to use them. Wulvers. So, can I just say that I love the Wulver models. I don't think that Wulvers are the strongest things in Ariadna or in this sectorial that you can take. They are viable. The really interesting thing about these guys is that they're physical 14 and they do have grenades, so I think their strength is getting up very close to you, where they can spec fire you or come around the corner and berserk you. Note that with climbing plus, you can sort of move up a wall just out of line of sight of something, force them to do a zone of control reset or change facing. They've wasted their arrow, then you keep coming up over the lip of the wall, the cliff, whatever it is, and into close combat with them, or close enough that you can spend another order just walking straight in and then hitting them. And that's where you could do a lot of damage. Where these guys are not so good is where you're spending all of those points without utilizing climbing plus or spec fire or their close combat stat and just trying to shoot with them. So if you're just trying to go around hitting them with a T2 rifle Mark 12, I feel like you're paying too much points for that, and the faction has got other strengths that need to be used. You've got your AP rifle, grey rifle. You've got your Caledonians and McMorrow and all that kind of thing. Uxie McNeil. They should be doing the shooting, right? Or the grenade throwing. These guys are better at getting up close, doing spec fire as well, berserking. The link team of Wulvers, it's pricey, and I feel like you're going to get into situations where they're going to have to shoot things with their BS12 plus link bonuses, and you may not feel that they're fast enough or that they're shooty enough to really merit taking them. They're just, they are 2 wounds, okay, so that's not bad, but again, no BTS. I'm not feeling them as a shooting link team, right? They can shoot. But again, if you're going to be making the choice to play this faction and play that particular setup, you're going to start feeling jealous of what other factions linked teams can do. They can harass though, so there is that possibility. So maybe the T2 rifle, Mark 12 and heavy shotgun, maybe that's not as big an investment, so you might want to go for that. This might be a pretty good choice for limited insertion, where you take those 3 guys plus an expensive core of Scots, and then the next most expensive troopers you can get. So that might be a way to go. Oh, almost forgot to say one thing. Okay, let's say you are going to take the core. One funky thing you can do, and I keep saying this, is you can run across the other side of the battlefield and then spend a coordinated order on them to break the link, and all 4 of them throw a regular grenade at the enemy, and it's all 4 of them throwing with physical, 14, plus 3 for range, minus 6 for spec fire, so 4 dice on 11s, I think it is. Pretty amazing for damage, but again, they've got to get there, so you need a way of delivering them. McMurra, McMorrow, he's one of the most broken things in the game at the moment, and Corvus Belli have gone too far with the buff to total immunity. He didn't need to get his impetuous changed from extremely impetuous to normal impetuous, and he's even better in this sectorial, being able to be a data tracker and a regular trooper and all of that jazz. If you're going to be playing Ariadna, and if you're going to be playing Caledonia, why wouldn't you get this guy? He should be one of the first things you buy if you want to be a successful Caledonian player, trust me. And we've probably left the most important guy to the last. William Wallace. I think that the vast majority of your Caledonian lists, if not every single one of them, is going to be a Wallace Lieutenant. He makes everybody regular. He gives you that ability to do a coordinated order with his Lieutenant token. He himself is very good at leading a link team with his combi rifle, light flamethrower, smoke grenades, and all of that. He can join any fire team corps, so you can stick him in with your volunteers, or you can make 4 Galwegians. The possibilities are, volunteers plus Wallace, or Scots plus Wallace, Wulvers plus Wallace, I think, because it's fire team corps. Let me just double check that. Yep, the fire team core, just like we were talking about, or Galwegians plus Wallace. What I've seen some people do is to create a setup where you've got Wallace standing near to a couple of different link teams. So you put him with 4 Galwegians to start with, but he's standing nearby to 4 Scots Guards. So at the start of the turn, you have him linked up with the Galwegians so they don't go running off. Then you spend a command token, moving him over to the Scots Guards, who start shooting. So that can be quite effective, but it requires a lot of command tokens and management, so make sure you know what you're doing before you try and pull that off. Wallace himself is the only Caledonian model that has a combi rifle. He also has that light flamethrower, so bringing a bit of tech that you don't see elsewhere in the sectorial. He has smoke grenades, which you may not have in your Scots team. Let me just double check. I'm not really seeing any smoke grenades there, so he does add that factor. And willpower 15 for winning lieutenant to roll offs at the start of the game for initiative. He does have NWI but no shock immunity, so do be careful with him. And berserking with an explosive close combat weapon and CC22 makes him ideal for busting up objectives. Or a situation where you throw a smoke grenade at that tag, you move in with Wallace plus 4 friends, he berserks, and they end up taking like 12 armor saves or something crazy. So he can be brilliant when he gets up close, just like a lot of the other things in this sectorial can be. Before we finish up this sectorial review, why don't we just take the time to build a few lists and see what we're capable of. So let's throw Wallace in there straight away and come back to the start. We'll put in a single doctor. We'll go over to the Caledonian volunteers. I'm going to take 3 chain rifles and a paramedic, so you've got a specialist in there. And I'm going to lock him in with a grey rifle, APHMG. Really like that setup. I'm going to take 1 Dozer with a tractor mule device Cateran, so I'm going to take the T2 sniper. I may come back to this guy and add another one later on. Isabel, I'm going to leave her at home for now. Warcore, I'm going to take 1 with the 360 visor. Helps for the flash pulse for defense, and he's just going to be a regular trooper anyway. I'm going to skip the war driver because we don't really need the hacking abilities in this sectorial. I'm going to go ahead and grab a missile launcher in Camo State, 2nd Battalion, for those sweet, sweet AROs. Going to skip the Mormares, not going to get any more grey rifles, but I am going to grab a couple of Katyusha MRLs, or am I? No, we'll come back to these guys. I'm going to take a couple of Minesweepers, but I may swap out the Minesweepers for the MRLs if I get the opportunity with SWCs available. SAS troopers, I'm going to take one forward observer for specialization, and I'll take an assault pistol as well. Again, this guy's going to be swapped out for just another forward observer if we're playing missions like comm center, things which need buttons pressed. Isobel McNeil, definitely going to grab the 2 assault pistols version. Note that we still haven't, we're on 16 orders and we still haven't hit the cap. Caledonian, we're going to leave that guy at home for now. Galwegians, yeah, we're probably going to take a couple. I could take 4, but I'm only going to put 2 in this list. Wulvers, nope, we've already got Wallace in there, and we're definitely going to need McMorrow, so that does take us above the points cap. So let's go back. We want a 20 order list, so let's see where we can shave off a few points. I could drop the Cateran, but I think the better way to go is to drop the SAS there, so that'll rein that back in. And now I can look at maybe putting a Caledonian, although that's 25 points. So what we've got here is generally the basic sort of setup that I would run for most of my Caledonian lists. But let's say we throw a Caledonian in there, shift them to group 1, and try and get this list down to a point where it's, say, 20 orders. So Uxia maybe doesn't need to be in there. I generally prefer her. I can come back here and drop the Scot. So that's one way to go, but then again, I don't have a lot of SWCs being used, so if you run a list in this kind of style, it's going to be more like reliant on the McMurrans and the Cameronians of this world. I'll just check this. Group 1 exceeds the limit, so what we need to do is bring this round. So we haven't sort of done the groups correctly just yet, but this is a 20 order list which has a Cameronian in one group and McMurran in the other group, and we're able to play a game where maybe they've got some good arrows there. We try and kill the things that need to be killed with the Highlander. They may have some flash pulses around. Well, the Cameronians and the McMorrow is immune to that, so that's going to be very strong. We can impetuous over there and run over there and throw smoke grenades, and this is a full 20 orders of just pelting them with spec fire grenades, and a lot of armies are just going to wither underneath that. Thing is, though, that if they've got decently resilient troops, and if they've got good ARO set up, they may be able to beat this. We still haven't spent the full points allocation, so this might be where you upgrade your tractor mule to the Katyusha, for example, or you drop something and bring the Cateran back in there. To be honest, though, I feel like dropping one Cameroonian is okay, and what you do instead is you have McMurrow in the first group and Uxia spending a lot of the orders in the second group, and then you can start to add things back in, so we can come back to the Scots at this point and throw in either a Molotov or the missile launcher or both. I kind of like the Molotov more than the missile launcher because we've already got the Cateran being our arrow piece, so that may be enough. And the Scot with a Molotov can sort of deploy 16 inches out and can get angles to things that are going to go down more easily against a camouflage Molotov with surprise attack than they will to the APHMG Grey from the long range, or McMurrow trying to throw a grenade at long distance or something whack like that. So I don't mind it. We've still got 20 orders here. We have spent 4 SWCs now. And, you can pick one thing to be upgraded by 3 points, but you can start to see how this is a very big list. There are a lot of options here. We've cherry-picked some very strong troopers. Wallace can use the lieutenant order to get a bit of mobility around there with the coordinated orders. And look, like anything else, at the end of the day, it just needs to be played well. You need to look for those opportunities, choose the right arrow choices, choose the right things to spend your orders on. And even though I feel like overall Caledonia aren't at the top, in fact I probably feel like they're just below the bottom half in terms of the power ranking for infinity, any good player can make them work, and you can see somebody winning a tournament with a list like this, for example. This isn't the only way to play Caledonia. I feel like it's the best. We can drop a lot of stuff out there and have a 14, 15, 16 order list with a bit more quality in it, but you've just got the amazing potential to use cheaper troops to trade up with bigger troops. I feel like that's by far the more superior way to play it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this sectorial review. Hope you guys are having fun with Caledonia, and for those of you who are just starting out, go get yourself a box set for the starter set, buy yourself a box of Highlanders, grab McMurran, and get Scotting and get killing them. See you next time.